Hey everybody, CJ Maurer with Complete Payroll, back again for another episode of PeopleWork, where we interview a variety of professionals spanning the human capital management industry to learn more about what's important as it relates to running a business and managing a workforce of people. Today I'm really excited because this is the first episode that we're doing with one of our own, our fellow Complete Payroll employee, product manager, and resident time and attendance expert, Greg Nasso. Greg, thanks for being here.
CJ, I'm super happy to be here and excited to be doing this interview.
Awesome. Thank you. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about time and attendance and also some of the latest technology and trends that can really turn labor costs into a competitive advantage for employers by deploying the right time and attendance system. But before we get started, right, I am not somebody who has a lot of experience with time and attendance systems. And when I hear timekeeping, I just think, okay, well, you punch in and you punch out. And you send those hours to payroll so that somebody knows how many hours you worked and they know how much to pay you. That's it. I don't understand why it would be any more complicated or comprehensive or involved than that. But I know you know differently. So why don't you tell me why time and attendance is a lot more than just punch in, punch out?
Sure. So, any time and attendance system can be a process in which employees are going to report their hours to their company, their supervisor, tracking the different hours that they worked or maybe different things that they worked on over the course of the period, right? Now, this can be any type of system. It can be as simple as a piece of paper, right, that I write my hours on, and it can be as complex as software that's integrated with multiple access points and methods in which employees feed their punches or their hours worked that integrates with something like HR and payroll systems, right? And so at the beginning, right, you need to focus on, well, what is your organization doing? Like, what industry are you in? How many employees do you have? And then what type of system is going to manage your complexity in an efficient, effective manner, right? But then that can be, again, as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. It can be as simple as a piece of paper. But it can be as complicated as a software that has scheduling components, that it has various punching methods. It could incorporate a mobile application. And so it really depends on what type of industry you're in and the types of employees that you employ, what type of compliance that you might be involved in.
What are the common types of systems that you encounter?
We commonly come across clients that do still utilize like a paper timesheet. That is something that, as a time and attendance expert, someone that has worked in the industry for almost 10 years, right, I'm still kind of taken aback by and surprised by, but that is something that we commonly come across. It is very cost effective in that, I guess maybe in terms of dollars and cents, right? It doesn't cost very much up front to utilize that type of system, but something that commonly our clients don't realize is the overhead that comes with utilizing that type of approach in terms of the time for your payroll processor just to gather up all of that data and then enter it into a type of payroll platform, whether it is calling it into your customer service rep or it's hand keying that data, totaling up the hours, doing the math, right? That can take time, right? That is then costing you at least a higher clip. Your payroll processor, your HR administrator is probably at a higher expense than maybe your employees that, right, are just punching in and out. But then there's also the high, like the cost of your employees maybe just reporting their time and you not knowing if this is exactly when they started and this is exactly when they ended. So commonly, employees will estimate their hours in their favor when they report on this paper time card. And so if I'm adding maybe 7 minutes to my day every day, that can add up to a huge additional labor expense over the course of the year, especially as you have more and more employees. So commonly, we see that clients might still be utilizing this type of paper or Excel-based approach. And they might not realize the expense that comes along with that commonly would pay for itself if you were to pursue a more automated platform that helps you pay your employees more accurately.
So you made a couple very interesting points with regard to how moving away from like paper timesheets or Excel spreadsheets really benefits the employer in terms of saving a lot of time. And then, you're not paying hours that weren't actually worked. Like you said, even something as innocuous as 7 minutes a day could really add up to a lot over the course of a year. What about these systems on the employer side? Like, do they make the employee side, do they make the employee's life any easier?
So again, it probably depends on the system, the platform that you're looking at. I'd say that how do I want to say this? There are platforms today that incorporate something like a mobile application, right? That, depending on your vendor, place an extremely high value on the end user. And when we're talking about time and attendance, your highest number of users is always going to be the employee. You're going to have more employees than you have supervisors. You're going to have more employees than you have administrators. So a software platform that places emphasis on the access point that's going to impact the most users is a really great fit in this case. Now, right, if you have something like a mobile application that might incorporate time off balances, it might incorporate a time card view where the employees can see the hours that they work, possibly approve their time card, then signaling back to their supervisor, their HR administrator, that their hours look correct. A mobile application that also incorporates scheduling data, where if the employees are scheduled regularly, they can see their scheduled shifts available to them all on their mobile application. These types of access points that add value to the employee while also possibly making it simple and easy for them to do something like either still report their hours if that is what you think is going to work better for you culturally than having them actually punch in and punch out, or a mobile application that also incorporates a punching method where the employees now have this really simple place where it's quick and easy for them to record these transactions. Commonly, clients, again, that are still using these paper time cards, they might have a cultural issue where it is hard for them to sell their workforce on actually punching in and punching out because they have used this paper time card for so long, and they don't want to do it another way. They're comfortable with it. B, maybe they have been working it in their favor, right? But this is a major hurdle for these types of clients. They need to sell this platform, and it needs to add value both to the organization but to the employees as well. And so these types of tools can make it simple and easy for them, which might help overcome that roadblock. Yeah,
I mean, you had to pause for a second, but you gave a really great answer. There's some pretty clear benefits on the employee side in terms of, just ease of use, right? Like, yes, there may be some few exceptions where it sounds like if they're used to an old system, the idea of doing something new may be challenging. But generally speaking, having a web-based app or something on your phone where you could just punch in and punch out or whatever, look up stuff, is way easier, way less friction. We're in a world where we're getting more and more used to being able to access any of the information we need right in our pocket.
Exactly.
Right? Plus, obviously, being able to look up, oh man, how much time off do I have left? Like, maybe you're one of those situations where, do I want to go to this concert in Cleveland, or should I take this day? And it's like one of those things where you gotta kind of decide if you want to take the day, how much time you have off. Like, that's pretty cool to me, right? But let's talk about mobile app. So I've never used a mobile app to punch in or punch out in my life. But obviously more things are moving mobile. Why don't you talk about, we said at the beginning we were going to talk a little bit more about some of the more emerging trends in time and attendance world. Why don't you talk about the aspects of mobile time and attendance and some of the benefits that it affords employers?
Absolutely. So mobile applications can incorporate a time clock function, right? Commonly, it's something that you can restrict depending on your type of employees. Maybe you have...
What does that mean to restrict depending on type of employees?
So maybe you have like some of your employees travel and they go work at different sites, but then other employees work at your headquarters and they work on site, right? So you might want your on-site employees that aren't traveling around to not have the ability to punch in and punch out on their phone because you've purchased this physical time clock on the wall, or maybe you prefer that these employees that are on site, they have a computer at their desk. You want them to use this method, and you don't want them punching from their phone because they really don't need that access. Right? You're more comfortable having them punch from their workstation. They don't need mobile access.
Got it.
So their mobile phone doesn't show the punch features, but they can still check their time card, add notes to their time card, make their electronic time off requests, which come to their supervisor to approve, right? Check all those things that we talked about so far. Where you have your traveling employees and they're out on the road, and so they need to be able to clock in and clock out as they get to different work sites and do different things. And so this group of employees, you would enable this feature for. And so when they pull up their mobile application, they see the time clock features and they can punch in when they get on site. The app can collect GPS data, so your supervisors or administrators can still go back through and maybe review these transactions to make sure they're where they're supposed to be.
Now, that's the term you used for this when we were talking about this before was geofencing, right? That's geofencing, right? Basically restricting employees' ability to punch in or punch out based on whether or not they're in a certain location.
So geofencing is an additional layer, right?
Oh, okay.
So you can have mobile punching where your employees can punch from their phone, and it's not necessarily tracking based on specific locations. Now, geofencing is something that I'm incredibly excited about. This is, again, emerging trends in technology. What geofencing allows you to do is specify within your system specific locations that employees really are supposed to be punching from, right? And so now, again, you can still control it at an employee level. So maybe you have your handful of employees that work all over the place, and so you don't want to be notified when they punch outside of your fence. They're not really restricted by a fence, right? But if we think about maybe like ourselves, like our company, for example, we have essentially 4 different main locations that employees would punch from. So we could tag them in our system, and now employees, they could punch from their phone, and as long as they're punching at one of these locations, it's an acceptable punch. And if I were to punch from home, let's say, I'm outside of the fence, and the system would generate an email notification to my supervisor so they know that I violated the rule. And they can see it represented right on my time card. There's all sorts of reports that they can run in the system that help track when I'm abusing the system, right? Now, the big value piece that this adds is that this is the direction that just our whole society is moving, right? Everyone has, most people have a smartphone, right? And while some employers might feel more comfortable having their employees use a physical clock which costs substantial money up front to purchase and acquire, right? So it's a higher upfront cost, could even restrict you from moving forward with a software platform that is going to help cut down on your labor expense, and it is going to cut down on your time to process payroll. And so in the long run, it really is going to save your organization money, right? Outside of that, right, mobile punching allows the employee to have a better experience overall and could potentially help you attract higher quality labor, retain your higher quality employees, because you are investing in these different platforms that make their experience working all the more better. And the downside, the cost to you is really minimal, right? Geofencing is a feature that costs very little, if any, additional to incorporate in your software platform, right? And now, okay, I could pull into the parking lot, and then maybe that's within the fence, and okay, I could clock in there and maybe get an extra 30 seconds as I walk into the building, right? But the other side of that is your employees sprinting into the building because they know that they're almost late, and then trying to punch in on your fingerprint scanner, having the first scan not work, right?
And so there's like sweat on their finger?
Right, because they're worried. And so now they're smashing their finger on the clock, and the sweat's beating down their face because they are just anxious. They don't want to be late. They don't want to have that conversation with their supervisor. They really were in the building on time, right? Now they're trying to enter their password in their computer, and it doesn't work, and then they have to enter it again, and now they're starting off their day anxious, worried, concerned, right?
Right.
Not like the best.
So the mobile app, it's there, right? You're within the fence, you're within the, restricted area, you punch in, frictionless. At the same time, it gives the employers a little bit of credibility, right? So they can make sure, one, they give their employees an easier way of punching in. But they also make sure that, people, aren't punching in when they're not actually,
Exactly.
On site. So
they can still track all the data, right? We can still see it all. And so we are encouraging our clients to pursue this technology, because we want our clients to be industry leaders in their tools and technology that they can incorporate with their staff, right? But then they add verbiage in their employee handbook that just sets standards in terms of how they're going to manage infractions and exceptions. We leave it to department heads, supervisors to kind of really dictate what it is they want to do and the exceptions they want to make for their staff. But the record is on the employee's time card. We have all the detail. The audit history is there. So if you were to choose to do something with an employee that has abused your system, you have the documentation in your handbook, you have the record on the time card, and so you're really well protected in the regard of an employee that maybe is abusing these opportunities. And then, right, in the same case, if maybe an employee abuses it, but you're not going to part ways, you could still choose to remove that access from them and force them to punch from a computer or an on-site terminal, where other employees are afforded this.
So it's pretty flexible
privilege, right?
Okay, so we've covered a lot, right? We've covered, why is time and attendance something beyond just punching in and out, right? The most of like the common systems that people use, and we got into mobile app and geofencing, and I personally, I think we should do this again. I think there's a whole lot, it seems like, to talk about when it comes to the world of like time and attendance and employee scheduling, things like that. But for the purpose of putting a bow on this conversation, based on everything we talked about, one of the things that I'd be interested to hear, and maybe anybody who's watching, is what would you recommend to somebody who has identified that there's some steps to take improving their time and attendance system for efficiency's sake on both the employer and employee side, and maybe they're considering making a change or something. Like, what would you recommend to people in those situations?
So the first thing I would consider is just how much time are you spending gathering up your hours for your employees and incorporating that in the payroll. Is it an efficient process, or is it taking you time, dollars? Is it easy, or is it a pain, right? The next thing that I would ask is just like, what are our primary business needs in terms of tracking time? Do we just need a clock that employees can punch in and punch out on? Do we have different jobs or projects or cost centers we're really trying to expense our employees' hours across? Do we have different override rates, shift differentials that we need to track and automate? And then, if the answer is yes to any of those things, then go back. Like, is your current platform, is your current system doing that efficiently? Is it effective? Or is it a manual process? Is it taking substantial hours and time for you or your supervisors to get you the right information so that then you again can incorporate it in payroll? The last thing that I would really consider too is, like, do you have a scheduling need? Or do you need to create schedules for your staff on a weekly or bi-weekly basis? Do their schedules change? Do you need to communicate this data to them? If the answer is yes, do your employees' schedules then change after it's been published? How do you manage those scheduling changes? Do you have some type of coverage or compliance need that you're trying to schedule for? If you schedule your staff, how well are you scheduling them, forecasting their hours, trying to reduce your overtime expense? What is your system there that helps you in that regard? And if you don't really have one, think about, what is the cost then of not proactively planning my overtime expense, proactively planning the hours that I'm assigning to different individuals to make sure that we're doing everything we can to plan appropriately, and then afterwards go back through and audit exceptions to that to understand why I had more hours than I planned on, why I had overtime for a particular individual when I really only scheduled them for a certain amount of hours.
And it seems like a common theme here with like planning and making sure that things stay efficient and really generating a benefit for both sides. So that's really interesting. Hey, thanks so much for carving out some time. I think we should do this again, really appreciate diving a little bit more into into the world of time and attendance and some of the more emerging trends within that process. So everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. We're going to provide some ways to get in touch with Greg if you're interested in picking his brain and learning a little bit more about his expertise. And aside from that, we'll be back soon with another episode of PeopleWork. Thanks so much.